Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we've got to talk about bankruptcy because data brokers going bankrupt are a huge problem for privacy. Now, here's what's going on, and I thought this was really interesting, and quite frankly, it's something I never really considered until I read this recent article by John Keegan of The Markup, and I think this is an important one because here's the backdrop of this. In 2021, a company specializing in collecting and selling location data, they're known as NEAR, N-E-A-R, they were basically bragging that they are the, quote, world's largest data set of people's behavior in the real world. End quote. They say they had basically data that represented 1.6 billion people across 44 countries. That's a lot of cell phone integrations, I tell you what. Now, last year, interestingly enough, the company went public with a valuation of $1 billion. That's per the SPAC. And 7 months later, they filed for bankruptcy and essentially agreed to sell the company. But for the 1.6 billion people that NEAR said its data represented, there's the question, what happens with that absolute ton of location data? Any company could essentially gain access to it by purchasing the company's assets. And so here's the crux of the situation, and here's why this is becoming a very serious issue, because disparate laws across the United States, meaning state to state, has different laws on things like, in this case, abortion, mean that potentially people that weren't previously criminalized could be criminalized simply for having that procedure. Now, I'm going to say this right out of the gate. I do not care what your politics are. I do not care what your beliefs are. You could be pro or anti-abortion. The whole point is we are talking about data privacy, and data privacy is something that should be sacrosanct to any American because we have a right to privacy in the Constitution. So again, I don't care what side of the law you are on this or what side of the argument you're on this. This is an issue from the data privacy standpoint, regardless of that. Now, the prospect of this data, including NEAR's collection of location data, is basically locations such as abortion clinics, and it could be sold off in bankruptcy. Now, that's raised alarms in Congress, and so last week, Senator Ron Wyden, who I've talked about continuously on this, basically my radio show, podcast, video, all that, because honestly, he's doing the cyber lord's work, he wrote to the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, urging them to, quote, protect consumers and investors from the outrageous conduct, end quote, of NEAR, and basically cited that his office's investigation into this company that is based out of India. Now, this is actually really interesting as well, because Wyden's letter also urged the FTC to, quote, intervene in NEAR's bankruptcy proceedings to ensure that all location and device data held by NEAR about Americans is promptly destroyed and is not sold off, including to another data broker, end quote. In other words, this foreign company has basically tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of location data on Americans, and that's wow. And so by virtue of that, the FTC looks like they're going to step in because they took such action back in 2010 to block the use of 11 years worth of subscriber personal data during the bankruptcy proceedings of a publication called XY Magazine. Now, that publication was basically oriented towards gay men. And so by virtue of that, that's incredibly sensitive data. And so essentially, they decided to go ahead and intervene, the FTC, and block the sale of that data because the agency requested that the data be destroyed to prevent its misuse back then. Now, Wyden's investigation was spurred by a May 2023 Wall Street Journal report that NEAR had licensed location data to the anti-abortion group Veritas Society so that they could target ads to visitors of Planned Parenthood clinics and attempt to dissuade women from seeking abortions. Now, again, I do not care what side of the fence you're on. The whole point is we shouldn't be data mined to begin with, so there should be no targeted advertising for or against this, because again, privacy should be sacrosanct. Now, Wyden's investigation revealed that the group's geofencing campaign focused on 600 Planned Parenthood clinics across 48 states. I'm assuming that's the lower 48, excluding Alaska and Hawaii. Now, the journal also revealed that NEAR had been selling its location data to the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies. Now, I've talked about that before, how the Pentagon and intel agencies were buying Americans' basically data that had been data mined and scraped from various Facebooks of the world, et cetera, et cetera. I've talked about that, but NEAR apparently was one of those sellers. And according to NEAR's privacy policy, all of the data they have collected can be transferred to new owners. under the heading, quote, "Who do you share my personal data with?" end quote. And essentially that lists under that section prospective buyers of our business, quote unquote. So that's obviously a huge thing, because what if a foreign intelligence agency goes ahead and buys location data on potentially hundreds of millions of Americans? Does that include military personnel, other personnel in intelligence agencies, members of Congress? We don't know. It goes above and beyond just the simple abortion issue. And so this week, a new bankruptcy court filing showed that Ron Wyden's request, Senator, again, had been granted. Now, the order placed restrictions on the use, sale, licensing, or transfer of location data collected from sensitive locations in the United States, and requires any company that purchased that data to establish a, quote, sensitive location data program, which details policies for such data and ensure ongoing monitoring and compliance, including the creation of a list of sensitive locations such as reproductive health care facilities, doctors' offices, houses of worship, mental health care providers, correction facilities, and shelters, among others. I have to imagine military's in there as well. Now, the order demands that unless consumers have explicitly provided consent, the company must cease any location use or transfer of location data. Now, in a statement emailed to the Markup, which is the publication I'm cribbing from here, Senator Wyden wrote, quote, "I commend the FTC for stepping in at my request to ensure that this data broker stockpile of American sensitive data isn't abused again." And for the record, NEAR did not respond to requests, but this opens up a can of worms in the sense of, one, NEAR is a company based out of India. And so how are we necessarily making sure that, let's say, laws, in India are governing this Indian company because they've got location information on the United States? Are we going to have reciprocity under Indian law? Will they enforce this? And who's to say they can't sell it on the back end, out of another entity or something like that to foreign intelligence agencies or something else? This is a very serious issue. And one of the problems that we have with the internet, and it's amazing that it interconnects the world, but it also interconnects our data. And so our data is sitting overseas, literally through location data. Now, NEAR, I'm sure, was integrating software development kits into various apps that users were using. So you're walking around with that iPhone or you're walking around with that Android, and it's sending data back to NEAR. I'm probably caught up in that too, as all of you are listening to this or watching this. This is a huge issue. Now, the other side of this coin is we have a deeply divided political system at the moment here in the United States. And so the Biden administration, being very pro-abortion, is going to ensure data privacy of abortion clinics. But when you look at a state like Alabama, for example, that is very anti-abortion, their state Supreme Court literally just said that IVF, in vitro fertilization, essentially that they are actual humans, and the law is still trying to figure that out. Or Texas, that has criminalized abortion. Those are going to be issues if, let's say, their political side gets into power. Would they then say, no, we want the data so that we can go after these people because we're against this and they're for it? I'm not saying they would. I don't know. I'm not getting political. But the point is that political systems change. Parties change in power. And if that changes, that may also change the law, but also what happens to this data. And so these are things that we have to consider. And again, I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on, what side of the argument you're on when it comes to, let's say, reproductive rights, et cetera, et cetera. The point is we have an enshrined constitutional right to privacy. And if we are taking that away in some way, shape, or form, I think that's negative. And I don't care what the issue is that the privacy is revolved around. And so that's something that needs to be enshrined. We are behind in the United States on ensuring that. And while we ensure the right of privacy against search and seizure, and self-incrimination, all these kinds of things, why doesn't that extend to the internet? Why doesn't that extend to our data? Because we are the most data-mined humans in history, and that is around the world. So that is your food for thought for the day, but this is obviously a very concerning situation. We're going to see where this goes. I'll keep you up to date on this if this changes, but as of right now, that data appears to be protected, at least in some form, as best we can tell, because again, the company is in India, so what are you going to do? So think about it that way. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.